The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight, did the two Ontario leaders' debates or the French language debate move the needle at all in this 44th general election campaign? Up first, we diagnose the four major parties' plans for our healthcare system. That's next on the agenda. Premier Doug Ford cited President Donald Trump's tariff threats as the reason for the early election call. But according to polls, voters rank healthcare as the top issue they say will influence how they'll vote. And with a doctor and nurse shortages, emergency room closures, and other pressing challenges, what prescription do the parties have to fix our ailing healthcare system? Let's dig in with Erin Kelly, Provincial President of Ontario's Nurses Association based in Toronto. In northern British Columbia, Dr. Sarah Newberry, a family physician in Marathon, Ontario, and the Assistant Dean of the Physician Workforce Strategy for NOSM, the Northern Ontario School of Medicine. And with us in studio, Dr. Dominic Novak, President of the Ontario Medical Association and a family doctor at Women's College Hospital, and Dr. Jobin Varghese, President of the Ontario College of Family Physicians and Interim Assistant Dean of Primary Care Education for the School of Medicine at Toronto Metropolitan University. Welcome to you both in studio and welcome to you both online and for joining us. Let's start off. I'm sure we all know the recent coverage in Walkerton, Ontario. Hundreds of people lined up in the snow as early as 2 a.m. in the morning, chance to get a spot for a family doctor. Fortunately, as we know, they are not alone. Let's look at some data to see what the gaps look like. So in 2023, 2.5 million Ontarians were without a doctor. In 2026, 3 years later, that number ballooned almost double to 4.4 million Ontarians without a doctor. And that's an expectation, of course, for in 2025. All right, so according to the Ontario Medical Association, Ontario needs 3,500 family doctors, and we need them now. So I'm going to come to you, Dominic. How do we go about doing that?
Part of this is going to be making family practice attractive again for medical students and then also for existing doctors. I'm president at the OMA, but also a teacher for medical students and residents. What I'm hearing is that they're seeing the reality of the unsustainable workload, the fact that family medicine is no longer seen as a viable career for many of our colleagues in this province. So let's make it attractive again to be a family doctor. That'll bring family doctors in, but just as importantly, it'll keep the doctors that we already have in this province ready to work doing the practice of family medicine.
All right. Jobin, I'm going to quote Dominic. He had mentioned, it's sort of like a Hunger Games when it comes to recruiting doctors. And it's not, we have the scene of people waiting in line, but let's talk about the municipalities and the communities that are fighting to get these doctors to come to that. With that, how do we go about, it's a big issue, but how do we go about doing that?
I think it's scary. 2.5 million people is just not okay. There's too many people who are waiting to get a family doctor, and we need to get to the point where everyone has access. But like Dominic said, it's critically important that we get those family physicians supported by teams and having the right technology at their fingertips. I'll use an example. If I am working with a patient who had a car accident and now has a concussion, I'm going to have paperwork to do for their insurance company, for their work, to be able to get them back to work. Having things like an artificial intelligence scribe could allow me to document more effectively and be able to help get that person back to work at a sooner rate. On top of that, if we had things like centralized referral systems, it would also allow us to more effectively pass through the healthcare system.
All right. Dr. Sarah Newberry, we know you've been in this game trying to recruit when it comes to the North. This is not an issue. And here we have Jobin talking about AI. We're in a whole new world here. It's very interesting. So I'm curious, with the fight that you guys have and what you guys need to do, what is sort of the solution in terms of fixing that shortage?
I think this is a really important question, Jeyan, and I think one of the pieces that feels profoundly important is the creation of a rural and northern health workforce strategy. So I think what Dominic and Jobin have highlighted are a couple of tactics that are important that would make practice more manageable. But there is a whole swath of tools and opportunities that we have at every level, from the federal government and tax incentives to the provincial government and how we create infrastructure supports, like Dominic and Jobin have referenced, to recruitment and retention incentives, to more robust team-based care. But part of what we need is to align all of those tactics in a coherent strategy that we can implement and drive over these next 4 years to achieve the target that's been laid out, and that we can measure and evaluate as we move forward.
All right. Sarah, I'm going to stick with you. The OMA also estimates that almost 40% of those practicing now are considering retirement in the next few years. I was in Wawa a few months ago, and I was talking with Dr. Cotterill, someone who's been practicing with his partner since 1998. And, you know, when you start thinking about succession plans and what's next, there's a lot of concern there. And I'm curious, should we be trying to convince them to stay? Is that part of the solution, or is it trying to get new people in? What do we do with that sort of, the people that have been there, who've made those connections, what should we be doing with them?
So I would say absolutely, it is not an either or, it is a both and. We have made some really important decisions as a province about the expansion of medical schools and postgraduate training programs. We've made some really important decisions about how we will welcome and support internationally trained physicians to the province. But we need to remember that medical education is not bums in seats in lecture halls. It is a shoulder-to-shoulder apprenticeship with clinicians, with doctors who have experience in the community. And so if we want our medical trainees to practice in communities that need them most, we absolutely need to be retaining the doctors Cotterill and Oberoi and Wawa and seasoned clinicians wherever they are, so that they can do that training and apprenticeship of our medical learners, so that they can mentor new grads at the transition to practice, so that they can support those new grads as they enter, and ideally help them to be retained in practice. Absolutely need to focus on recruitment, but without retaining our current clinicians, recruitment won't be as successful as it should be.
All right, Dominic, I'll get your take. Yeah.
You know what, Sarah talks about this concept, gravity, when it comes to recruiting and retaining doctors. Those seasoned clinicians, the teachers, are oftentimes the ones that are actually pulling in other doctors into the community. So without that sense of gravity, it's actually really hard to recruit new docs, especially in rural and northern communities.
What is the sales pitch to your friends then in that case?
Yeah, that's one of the first things that doctors ask when I meet with docs across the province in terms of their joy in work. And it means something like, is there a foundation for the healthcare system? Is there a team that I could join? Are there other doctors there and other health professionals that I can rely on for support? That's what doctors are looking for when they're looking for where to set up shop in Ontario.
All right, I'm going to open up the bullpen. I want to talk nurses. All right, Erin. Data from the Canadian Institute for Health Information shows that in 2023, Ontario had 651 registered nurses per 100,000 people. The Ontario Nurses Association says that's the lowest staffing ratio in the country, and it's getting worse. I kind of want to, before I ask you how we're going to attract and retain, how did we get here? And I know it's been there's a lot of things that have happened, but how did we get here?
How did we get here? Since 2018, we've just seen failed policy after failed policy. We've seen underfunding of the healthcare system broadly, in particular primary care, as everyone else has discussed today. And when you have a shortage of 25,000 registered nurses in the system, you can imagine how this plays out for primary care and home care in particular. They're far worse off than other sectors.
All right. So with that being said, how can Ontario attract nurses and retain more nurses?
I think it's important to note that the Ford government spends the least per person in the country on healthcare, at just over $4,800 per person. And that would require a further investment from this government of 15.5% just to bring us to the average. So what does this look like for primary care? Well, the answer is in primary care for nurses and healthcare professionals, that would require an additional $2 billion investment in wages just to bring them up to what hospital sector workers make, which is completely unacceptable. So when you look at working as a team in primary care, it's very difficult to incentivize working in this sector when their wages are sometimes almost 30% less than the hospital sector. They're having a hard time providing for their families, so they go where they can make the best wage.
All right.
And not where they would prefer to work. So
You talked about money. I want to show a little bit of some information of the four parties and the promises that they're making to boost numbers of GPs. So the PCs are promising 305 primary care teams at a cost of $1.8 billion. The NDP, 3,500 doctors at $4 billion. The Liberal Party at 3,100 doctors at $3.1 billion. And then the Greens at 3,500 doctors at $3 billion. You can see there's a little bit of a difference in price there from the NDP and the Greens, same number of doctors. All right, Jobin, the PC pledge is a bit different. 305 primary care teams. Why the distinction?
Well, I can't speak to why the distinction, and I don't really think rating one or another is going to be worthwhile. What I do think is important is that it's clear everyone sees this as a clear need to speak about, and now implementation is the important part. So significant problems require significant investments. We need to get to the point where these numbers start actually working towards seeing the boots on the ground and getting to the people that need to get the care. If I were to use the example of diabetes, the complexity that can occur means that it's not enough to just say we're going to put a nurse here and a pharmacist here and they're not going to integrate with family medicine. We need to actually integrate them and allow family docs and communities to decide how those teams will best work. So the money is important and it will need to go to many parts, including compensation, especially given the fact that family docs have been below inflation in terms of their compensation rate. And I know that the Ontario Medical Association is working with the government on that. But I think that this is where having family physicians supported by teams that they can co-create with their community, integrate and work together, and have those technologies work together as well.
All right, Dominic, I'll get your take on that as well. And does it make sense with sort of those numbers that they're laying out? Is there a distinction between those 305 primary care teams versus just single numbers in terms of doctors?
Yeah, what I will highlight here is that I think it's possibly historic that all of the parties are talking about connecting everyone to a family doctor. And that's the start, the foundation of our healthcare system. If you have a family doctor, you end up getting preventions, cancer screening done on time, you end up using the emergency room less often, you save hospitals for the people who need them, you live longer and at a lower cost to the healthcare system. So that's potentially historic with the right leadership, and voters should decide who do they trust to bring our healthcare system to that future state of a family doctor for everybody. What I will say in addition to that is we also need to look at how do we offload pressure from our emergency departments, and then also how do we get our wait lists under control. I'm not hearing a lot about that, even though I'm really glad that we're talking about a family doctor for everybody in this province.
All right, we'll talk about ERs shortly, but I'm going to stick with you, Dominic, because I want to ask, a Nick Nano's survey asked which party they trust to most deal with the doctor shortage. 28% for the Liberals, 26% for the PCs, 21% for the NDP. Those numbers, let's put them aside. I'm just curious, which party do you think has the most comprehensive plan?
Yeah, what I will say is that this is a problem that's actually resulted from successive governments over years and decades. And what we need is a comprehensive, ambitious plan across party lines to get our healthcare system back on track. And that means a family doctor for everybody, emergency departments that are open, and then wait lists that are under control. That's what we're talking about. And that's where voters need to make the call. And I think for those of us in healthcare leadership, we're ready to work with anybody who assumes office in next week.
All right. Sarah, I'll get your take on that as well.
Yeah, I think what Dominic and Jobin have spoken to is really important. I think the only thing that I would add is that sometimes those numbers, like $3 billion, can seem big and overwhelming. But when we're talking about investing in primary care, we are talking about money that will be saved downstream. So if we can provide really good primary care, prevent serious illness, support people in the community, we will save money in the hospital sector and in other spaces where we are spending a lot of money now. So this $3 or $4 billion, whatever the number is, that we invest now in primary care is an investment, not a cost. And I think it's really important that we're clear about that. The other thing that I would say is, as we focus on the health of the economy, we need to remember that, and we learned this well during COVID, that a robust and vibrant economy depends on having a healthy population who can engage in the workforce. And so as we think about that investment in primary care, those dollars will also pay off in a vibrant economy for this province.
All right, Erin, for-profit nursing agencies. We have spent the province more than $1.5 billion a year on them. And I know Dr. Newberry just said $3 billion sounds like a lot of money, 1.5 sounds like a lot of money. But should we be changing that? Should we be looking at how much we're spending on these for-profit nursing agencies?
Absolutely. Really, again, I could point to why nursing agencies cropped up, but I won't go into that. That's a history lesson and more time than we have today. But what you see is primary care isn't exempt from using nursing agency. In fact, there's a celebrated report, the Eckler report, that describes that nurses working who are agency nurses in primary care are making 41% more per hour than a regular unionized or non-unionized nurse or nurse practitioner in the sector. So it would be better invested in the nurses who work in this sector, in the healthcare professionals that work in this sector, and not spending as much to private agencies to fund.
Tobin, I'll get your take on that as well.
Well, I think privatization actually, in general, pulls away people from the public sector, and unfortunately goes to people who are usually more healthy and pulls away from people who need the help more. I think we need to use the investments we have to really strengthen our public system and ensure we get equitable access for all.
Private nurse practitioner clinics popping up across the province. Could this be part of the answer in terms of our primary care challenges?
I don't think we have a stance necessarily on that, but what I will say is that nurse practitioners, nurses, all play an important part of the team that we would want to build. And as we've talked about, implementation is critical. So ensuring that when we have nurses, nurse practitioners working together with family medicines that can lead those teams, that's where we're going to see a lot of benefit, and allowing our teams to strengthen and allow them to really help the most amount of Ontarians.
Dominic.
Yeah, what I will say is when I'm meeting with doctors across the province, one of the strongest recruitment tools is actually having a team there to support family practices. That means doctors working together with nurses, pharmacists, social workers, all sorts of health professionals working together for people's care. And that's actually another form of gravity that pulls in doctors into the communities that really need those docs.
All right. Hospitals, let's talk about it. 2024 was apparently the province's worst year for emergency room closures. 1 out of every 5 hospitals with an ER or urgent care center had unplanned shutdowns. Sarah, why is the situation getting worse?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question, and I think it largely has to do with staffing challenges. Both physician staffing challenges, but nursing staffing challenges were actually the cause of more of the closures of emerged departments across the province. I would highlight as well that this is particularly a rural issue. Almost all of the service closures were in rural communities. Most of them were in Southern Ontario, but some of them were in Northern Ontario, where the distances to the next nearest emerged department can be frighteningly long. And so I think, again, to the point of the conversation that we had early on in this conversation, we need a strategy that is going to focus on the whole of the health workforce, that is going to help us to understand what we need to provide the care that Ontarians expect, not only in primary care, but in their nearest emergency department and hospital setting across the province.
All right, Erin, I'll get your take on that, because we mentioned nurses as well, who are part of that issue.
Until the end of 2021, I worked full-time as a registered nurse in an emergency department. And for 20 years. in fact. I can tell you that at that time when I left, it was chaos, and near closures frequently. So you can imagine over 200 closures of emergency departments last year in Ontario. I would really be frightened to see how many times emergency departments almost closed due to nursing and physician shortages. Without an investment in staffing, there's no end in sight to this either.
Dominic, do the parties have a plan to fix this?
I'm waiting to see details on those plans, but I will say this has a severe impact on people. Some time ago, I was meeting with a family who was taking their grandfather with signs of a stroke to a local rural emergency department that was close to home for them. They got there, saw a sign on the door that said emergency department closed, with the next one hours away. And we know in weather like right now in Canada, they're not getting there the same day. Right? And when you're having a stroke for your loved one, every minute matters. That's what we're dealing with. This is a matter of life and death for many communities. And we're talking about rebuilding those foundations. Family doctor for everybody, an emergency department close by that's open, and then wait lists that are under control. That's the standard that everybody in Ontario should expect of the healthcare system. We can get there, but it'll take the political will to do that.
I'm a little curious about, in terms of the parties, have we gotten any details on hospitals? Is there a little tricklings of some hope from parties in terms of what they're offering in terms of aid for hospitals?
You know what, I'd leave that up to the political leaders to answer. What I will say is that in Ontario, we actually do have a lot to be proud of our healthcare system. If you can get through the wait, if you could get a family doctor, if you could get into that hospital or emergency room, you get world-class care from world-class doctors and nurses and other health professionals at world-class hospitals, some of the best in the world, and you get world-class outcomes as well. So we have a strong foundation. It's the people behind the scenes that make that foundation strong, but we need the political will to get our healthcare system back on track, starting with the waits and access, and those are the types of foundations that we're talking about here.
All right, Jeyan, I guess.
And I think the biggest thing is that without having a clear foundational support of primary care, family medicine, we're going to continue to see these problems. And the ERs are a major symptom. By having a strong foundation and putting the investment into family medicine, we're going to see a lot of that wait list come down. We're not going to see people having to go to the ER because they don't have a family doctor. 2.5 million Ontarians without a family doctor means that they have to go to the ER, and those closures are lives lost. So I think this is a critical situation. I think the significant investments that we've heard about are extremely important, but the implementation is really where it comes from. We need to be seeing that not only are family doctors going to be brought in, both retained and recruited, but they're going to be supported by a team, the right team that's going to work best for the patients around them, and they're going to be surrounded by the right technology that allows them to best work in a way that helps patients and improves the efficiency of the healthcare system.
All right. Sarah, all these issues, as you mentioned, are more acute in Northern Ontario. In Sault Ste. Marie, a new nurse practitioner-run outpatient clinic had opened, providing care for roughly 10,000 people who lost their family doctors. People are driving hours, as we had mentioned, to see a GP in some areas without pediatric care. Women are actually temporarily relocating in the last weeks of pregnancy. I think there's sometimes always a disconnect here in Southern Ontario to what the issues are in Northern Ontario when it comes to, there's a lot of praise and thanks to rural generalists. They are the Swiss Army knives of the medical field. We know that very well, and the teams that are there. I'm curious, I had asked the gentleman here, in terms of the parties, but what parties, have we seen anything? Are they saying anything that will be useful, that gives you some hope on this topic?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question. And I think maybe because you've raised the issue about, sort of recognizing that the North is different, I will just remind the TVO audience that Northern Ontario is massive. It is the size of France and Germany combined. It is 25% larger than the state of Texas. And yet, across that huge geography, we have a population that is less than the population of the city of Ottawa. So less than 1 million people, over 850,000 square kilometers. And that geography creates some of the complexities that you've touched on. women having to relocate to be able to birth their babies, and a variety of other challenges. I think when I think about what political parties can and should be doing, I think Dominic has touched on it. This needs to be a commitment from all parties. Northern Ontario needs specific attention because the reality of Northern Ontario is different, not only in terms of our geography, but also in terms of the complexity of the population. People in Northern Ontario on the whole are older, poorer, and sicker than the rest of the population in the province. And so the needs for healthcare services and the needs for those services to be delivered locally are particularly significant. And I would love to see each party create a specific northern and rural health workforce strategy and health strategy. At one point, we did have a northern health equity strategy that has sort of quietly slipped away pre-COVID, and we haven't brought that back. And I think it's time to do that before Northern Ontario falls farther behind than it currently is. I also am going to just pick up on one other point because it is specific to rural, and that is, it's not entirely specific to rural, but is predominantly a rural issue. When we're bringing a family doctor to our rural community, we are also, through that family doctor, often staffing the emergency department. Mm-hmm. Because rural generalists, the Swiss Army knives of healthcare, do work in the office and they work in the hospital and they're in the emergency department and they're in long-term care and they're doing palliative care at home and they're often providing obstetrical services. So the magnitude of impact when we lose a family doctor, like Dr. Cotterill or Dr. Oberai from Wawa, is not only on patients in primary care, but is on the risk to the emergency services to that community. And using Wawa as an example, their next nearest emergency department is 2 hours south of them in Sault Ste. Marie or 2 hours west of them in my community in Marathon. So the impact of family physicians in our small communities, both in primary care and the hospital sector, cannot be underestimated.
All right, Dominic, I think, did you want to add in on there?
I was smiling because I was just in Sault Ste. Marie and I saw exactly this phenomenon play out where an entire community relies on a handful of doctors. There are docs that are staffing family practice clinics because they're often family doctors, but also working in the emergency room, delivering babies, doing end-of-life care, all these sorts of things. And they're so deeply committed to their communities that they're filling their community needs, just like doctors do, especially family doctors do, all across the province, especially in those rural and northern places.
All right, we're going to talk a little politics. I know you guys have been really good in avoiding a little bit, but I'm going to ask. Erin, I'm going to start with you. The PCs have been in power since 2018. Based on their health record, do they deserve re-election?
No, they don't. I'm supposed to be nonpartisan, but I need to be truthful. From a nursing and healthcare professional standpoint, they do not deserve re-election, and Ontarians deserve better. And that includes the workforce that we represent. So we're at a scary time, and I would like to see some change for the better. Otherwise, I don't know where we'll go from here.
Sarah?
I am excited about the commitment to primary care by all parties. I am excited about the decision to have launched the Primary Care Action Table with Jane Philpott. I will trust that whoever is reelected will continue that profoundly important work in service to all Ontarians. And I am really hopeful that whichever party is elected will continue that commitment and stop making healthcare a partisan issue.
Dominic.
Yeah, look, the challenges that we're seeing in healthcare have been over years, decades, successive governments. And the reality is that as Canadians, we want to be proud of our healthcare system, but over the years, we've neglected our healthcare system. And that includes in the last few years under this government's watch. What I will say is that there's a tide of change right now across parties and the recognition of the importance of a connection to family doctor and then rebuilding confidence in our healthcare system. And that's what we need to continue to focus on if we're going to restore confidence in a healthcare system that we can be proud of again as Canadians.
Sure.
I think it's pretty clear that every party has talked about how important it is for family medicine to be top of mind. And the fact that we're there means that we're in a really good place. I'm really hopeful that the dominoes have been set up. It's about getting to the point where we can push them through. I think the idea of the primary care action table is a great step. I think whichever party comes into power, it's going to be critically important that we keep family medicine at top of mind. The Ontarians have already made healthcare the top issue in this election. And I think that means that we're at a place that we can't afford to wait anymore. There's no more years, no more decades to wait. We need urgent issue now. People are hurting now. We need to see the change. And I'm hopeful to see that because this has become such a important nonpartisan issue. It's pretty clear that we need to get to the point where every Ontarian has access to a family physician. That family physician needs to have the right size team around them and the right technology around them.
All right. I want to pick up on a note actually that Dominic had mentioned. He said restore confidence. But I'm curious on a personal level, how do you restore joy? For you guys, it is clearly what we've talked about. There's a lot of burnout. There is a lot of potential dark clouds that are floating and there's hope. But how do we get joy back for you guys as care doctors?
One of the Ontario College of Family Physicians' main things is to bring back the joy and have family physicians thriving. And the way they can do that is actually be able to spend more time with their family, more time with their patients, more time not necessarily doing the day-to-day, the 19 hours of administrative paperwork that they have to do currently per week. These are the things that are driving that down and why family physicians are constantly saying, I love my work. I don't love the work associated with my work. And so we have technology, we have tools and tactics that can be used now. And the way that we're going to bring back joy is to allow people to really turn away from the computer screen and turn back towards their patient. Because that's where that joy is being able to be the highs and the lows with that patient and be able to really bring that forward. So allowing physicians to do what they trained for and not be a clerk, not do things that they haven't trained for.
All right. Erin, I want to get your take on that. How do we bring back the joy?
Well, I couldn't agree more. From a nursing perspective, from a healthcare professional perspective, we want to be able to spend time with our patients, safe time with our patients. We want to also go home and do the same thing as our colleagues in medicine are doing. We want to be able to go home and spend more time with our families, but be present in the moment, be present when we're giving care, have everything manageable, our family life and our professional life. And that would bring joy back.
All right, we have a couple minutes left. I have one question. I'm going to start with Sarah. What would you say to Ontarians who are making healthcare their ballot issue? Which party should earn their vote?
I think they're going to have to look at each of the party platforms and consider those strongly for people in Northern Ontario. I think there are some differences in the party platforms that focus on the North, and those will need to be considered by them. I think looking at the parties and their commitment to moving forward with both hope and courage to make the changes that we need to make urgently is going to be really important. And each citizen voter will develop their own sense of that from the political party platforms that they review. But I hope that they'll review them and look at the sense of urgency, the sense of commitment to healthcare in each platform and make their informed decision based on that.
Erin?
Oh, I would like to say, make an informed decision. Make your decision based on recent history. Look at what policies have been enacted. Ask yourself how you feel today. Do you have better access? Do you have better care than you had in 2018? And look at each party, individual. Look at every platform, every individual leader, and see, and make an informed decision.
Dominic?
Yeah, what I'll say is that there's no room for denialism in what the state of our healthcare system is. And our political leaders need to actually accept what's going on the ground in our healthcare system to move beyond that. And we can build to a better place. We can get to a world where we're proud of our healthcare system again in Ontario and as Canadians.
When do you get the last word?
Well, thanks for that. And honestly, I think Ontarians, you've made this the healthcare issue. You've made this issue the election issue. So choose the party that's going to help you get to the point where implementing having every Ontarian with a family physician that's supported by the right team and the right technology is the reality. Look at the platforms and go from there.
All right, Erin, Sarah, Dominic, Jobin, thank you so much for joining us online as well as in studio for this important conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Ontarians have now gotten to see all four leaders face off on the debate stage in North Bay on Valentine's Day, in Ontario's capital city on Family Day. PC leader Doug Ford, NDP leader Marit Stiles, Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie, and Green leader Mike Schreiner took questions on everything from healthcare to what they like to do in their spare time. Were Ontarians watching, and have the debates changed the race? To discuss, we welcome back Erin Kelly, CEO and co-founder of Advanced Symbolics Inc., who's been tracking this election using Polly, her AI pollster. Welcome to the program, Erin.
Great to be here.
All right, get us started. Did Ontarians watch the Family Day debate?
They did. Yeah, we definitely saw people tuning in, which is good. I would say, though, that the people who tuned in are people who are already very engaged on the election.
All right, I was going to ask, I'm curious, did the debates break through with voters less engaged in politics at all, or were it's the same sort of crop of viewers?
Well, we did. So we looked at the people who watched the debate, and then we looked at people who did not watch the debate. We did see some, if you call it memes, pop through. For example, Doug Ford saying that he promised not to build on the green belt, but then he did, and then he apologized. That definitely made the water cooler the next day, because we saw people who said they didn't watch the debate got that from the debate, and a few other things like his story of his first job definitely made the water cooler the next day. So we had a few of those things. But for the most part, the people who watched the debate were people who were already engaged.
All right. So you talked about some key moments in terms of conversation points. I'm curious, what were the other moments that got people talking the day after?
Well, it's really interesting. A lot of people, we haven't seen this in Poly before, where there was a whole discussion about the body language of the presenters, of the leaders, which was really interesting. Other key moments are probably what you've heard from friends and family. People where the spa broke through, the healthcare, and then people did like the personal anecdotes and actually talked a lot about those moments in the debate.
I want to pick up on the point about the posture, the body posture. Tell me a little bit, what was Polly picking up on that?
Yeah, this was really interesting. Like I said, we haven't seen this before. Usually people stick to the issues, but this time body language really seemed to poke through. People remarked first that they felt that Bonnie Crombie looked anxious, intense, like a little bit like she was fighting for her life in this one. With Mr. Ford, people found him, it's interesting, usually people find him very soft-spoken and whatever, but this time people found him sometimes dismissive and untrustworthy. The person who came out the best, the two people who came out the best were Marit Stiles and Mike Schreiner, with Mike Schreiner being number one. People found him very clear, very well-spoken, and a lot of people said they wished that he was maybe leading one of the other parties. It was kind of interesting.
Very interesting. All right. You had mentioned winners and losers, but I want to get back to Doug Ford. You had mentioned some of the other sort of issues that we knew were going to come up with the green belt, with the spa. But I want to talk about Doug Ford's healthcare record. Were there any hits, and did they land from the other leaders?
There were definitely hits, and a lot of people talked about it. The challenge here is that the people who are upset with Doug Ford over healthcare have already cast their ballot, if you will. I don't mean that literally they went and did it early, but they've made their decision. And so hammering that home did not get any new converts. The people for whom this election is about the economy or about tariffs, they're upset about healthcare. But it's a trade-off, right? And right now they're more concerned about the economy and jobs, and so they're like I said, those people did not convert. The people who were upset about healthcare were already not going to vote for Mr. Ford.
All right. You had mentioned that Polly had picked up that sort of anxious energy of Bonnie Crombie on the stage. At least that's what Polly said. Bonnie Crombie has a challenge as well in terms of distinguishing herself from Doug Ford. Is she succeeding in that?
She is not succeeding at that. So a number of issues. Let's take healthcare, for example, because it is a major issue. Mr. Ford kept bringing it back to the economy and saying, well, if we don't have a good economy, we can't have healthcare. That was a great opportunity for Ms. Crombie to say, well, the economy's been fine, so why don't we have good healthcare? I mean, it's not like we've been in a depression for the last few years, and yet we don't have access to healthcare. The other issue I think she could have distinguished herself on, because a lot of people brought this up in the conversation, was that Mr. Ford is treating healthcare like just an inconvenient expense item, when in fact, when you invest in healthcare, it's good for the economy. Not only because healthy people are good for the economy, you want to have a healthy workforce, both mentally and physically, but also because when you invest in new technologies in healthcare, and Canada's a leader in this, but unfortunately our governments aren't investing in new technologies and new ways of doing things. So Bonnie Crombie could have taken this, not just to say, I'm going to get you a doctor in 4 years, because they're all saying that, but to say, look, let's do it differently so that we benefit both healthcare and the economy at the same time, thereby addressing the issue for those people for whom this election is about the economy.
All right. I want to talk about another leader, Marit Stiles. She has a different challenge. Obviously, Bonnie Crombie is, in the provincial world, maybe a new face, but Marit Stiles has had a couple years as the official opposition leader. But according to Polly, people who know Marit Stiles like her. We know that. But she's not reaching new people. Have you seen signs that her debate performance, like you mentioned, she was potentially one of the winners coming out of that, has that helped her break out to new people?
No. Now, what Marit Stiles is doing very well, aside from being very likable, is that she has good vote efficiency. So from a popular vote point of view, she is less well known than Bonnie Crombie. So she's got about half of the recognition, but she's got about the same number of seats that she's leading in, because she's got that vote efficiency. She's reaching out beyond the GTA in Ottawa and the GTA, unlike Bonnie Crombie. So she's doing that well. But again, it's the other challenge that Marit Stiles has now is that people are starting to say, should we vote strategically? And I think that's a big risk for Marit Stiles, because, that means potentially bleeding some votes over to Bonnie Crombie if people think that she's better able to beat Doug Ford.
All right. Time is ticking. There's only 7 days left before people cast their final ballots. There's not much time for a lot of these leaders to make some impressions. I'm curious, overall, did the debates do anything to change sort of that campaign narrative that we have? And can we expect some surprises? I know Polly is going to be working overtime here, but what can we expect as we keep going from the debate as we move into the election?
Well, Doug Ford is well ahead, so I think what we can expect is another Doug Ford majority government. The debate did not change minds. It did not significantly change that trajectory. So the only thing, there's very little time left now and no other debates. So the ability to distinguish yourself. So again, Bonnie Crombie has to get outside of the GTA and Ottawa, which is where the majority of her support is. Getting more people angry about the spa just gets her a bigger margin in the areas where she's already leading. So she needs to get outside of those two core cities. And Marit Stiles just needs to build her profile. And the way to do that is to be different. And right now, they're not different enough.
I am curious, we've talked about those three leaders. Schreiner, what does he got to do? He's the winner out of there, potentially a third seat. That will be up for debate, but what's he got to do, if anything?
Well, for this election, I think he's just building his profile, and I know he's been doing that for a long time.
Yep.
But this isn't the election where people are going to take a risk on a new party that they know is very unlikely to form government. And so he's just looking at one or two seats. He's keeping what he's got, and he's leading in his own seat. So I really don't see this being a breakaway year for Mike Schreiner, unfortunately.
All right, Erin, we are going to leave it there. Look forward to seeing you on election night as well. Thank you so much for your insights and for Polly's insights.
Great. Thanks, Jeyan.
No barking. Not even to the post people. You'll be good. Okay? Be good. Wallet, keys, phone, ready to go. Just so you know, I never owned a trailer and I had to learn. I had to learn quick. Get your lights, make sure everything is secured.
For the past year, this has been Jose Moreno Garcia's morning routine. In 2023, he ditched his job as a dental hygienist in an office for a trailer hitch, opening the Universal Dental Center, a mobile dental hygiene clinic.
I said to myself, well, how much space do I really need to take care of my clientele? And 9 feet that way and 8 feet this way, so let's go find something that is close to that or near to it. And this is where it basically came down to. Say ah.
The trailer is fitted with all the bells and whistles of a dental office and offers the same level of service as most hygienists.
If anybody needs a referral, we put together a referral. But for the most part, it's pretty much, cleaning, routine stuff, and sharing experiences. And I think, what I enjoy the most is hearing the stories.
For an added touch, Jose has reggae music playing in the background, a long-standing tradition from his time working in a dental office. The trailer is also equipped with LED strip lights. While designing an inviting space, his ultimate goal is to bridge the gap in dental care by meeting people where they are, both physically and financially.
It's not cheap to get your teeth cleaned. On average right now, if I were to tell you checkup, cleaning, you get your polish, you might get some fluoride and some x-rays at a dental office, you're looking at about $330, which people don't have at this time. You gotta make sure that this is not going haywire.
With everything secured, Jose starts his day.
Getting on the road with this thing is not the easiest thing in life. But when you're there, the destination is the best thing ever.
His first stop is at the Native Canadian Centre of Toronto.
Hey, what's going on?
Jennifer Hammond is the community health navigator here at the center. For over 60 years, the NCCT has been a community hub, offering cultural programs, workshops, and support services for Indigenous people.
This is our auditorium, and this is where our weekly socials are every Thursday.
Jennifer runs different clinics throughout the year, including harm reduction, vision, and more recently, dental.
Jose had reached out to me when he was getting his mobile clinic started. He said that he could come out and run a dental clinic and have people come and just get their teeth cleaned here. They were like, "Oh, how are we going to do this? Like, am I coming into the building?" Like, they just didn't understand the whole concept. Actually, neither did I, to be honest, when we first connected. I thought he was going to set up in our auditorium, and then he shows up with this trailer that was fully equipped for the patients with the chair and everything, and I was just so amazed.
Jose serves some of the city's most vulnerable people. Not only can Jose treat people from his trailer, but since his equipment is portable, he can meet clients like those in care homes directly at their bedside. In many cases, basic dental care is covered through provincial or federal programs, like the Ontario Disability Support Program or the Canadian Dental Care Plan.
Preventative care, I think, is so important because that will, lead to people having their teeth longer. And it also affects people's confidence when they have to lose their teeth, their adult teeth. Accessing it too that is low cost is important. And, Jose has been remarkable with his pricing and reaching the communities that don't typically have access to dental care.
I brush my teeth every day, but I floss them.
Beautiful teeth.
When that's not available, Jose sets up flat rates that are affordable, and sometimes he's gone the extra step and offered dental care free of charge.
It was amazing. I felt super comfortable. He explained everything while he was doing it, and I feel like my teeth are reborn. Last time I went was maybe a year ago to get a filling, and then the last time I had a cleaning was over 2 years ago, which is probably not the best answer. I work part-time, so it's really hard to pay for the dentist and all these medical expenses because I don't have benefits.
Dental hygienists are licensed healthcare professionals who normally work alongside dentists to maintain oral health.
Turn towards me.
Outside of routine cleaning, hygienists can also perform oral cancer screenings and examine for other oral diseases. In Canada, legislation allows dental hygienists to provide some care without the presence of a dentist.
We, as dental hygienists in this province, pretty much, are the only profession where it's self-regulated with the college that oversees our standards, but we still have to walk into somebody's place of work and to get employment. It doesn't sit well with a lot of people. It hasn't sat well with a lot of people for a long time. I believe there's common ground where dentists, hygienists can work together, and kudos to you if you still want to do, some work in a dental clinic. I sometimes still do it because I have friends who own practices and they want me in there. But more and more hygienists want to be their own boss.
Jose represents a growing number of dental hygiene professionals who are going independent.
We go over things, see how healthy the gums are.
According to the Canadian Dental Hygienists Association, in the past 5 years, it has seen a 48% increase in the number of independent dental hygiene practices being opened. The biggest hurdle is financial.
I walked into a plaza and I was looking for an office space, brick and mortar. Had the office design and everything, and then I started looking at the cost and how expensive it is. And most of dentists out there are able to finance these things even fresh out of school. For most hygienists, it's nearly impossible to get that kind of money.
Dental hygiene is the 6th largest registered health profession in Canada, with over 31,000 registered hygienists. Just over 40% of them are here in Ontario. But according to Jose, current provincial regulations limit what a hygienist can do in their own practices.
Alberta is the poster child for hygienists in this country. They're autonomous, like basically they can take x-rays, they can diagnose periodontal disease, they can give anesthetic if you need it, And what, troubles me is that we're not there all across the country. And that comes with education. Whenever I talk to, many dentists, as long as the hygienist has taken the proper education, the qualifications, they should be able to do that, right? So, autonomy to me is this, but I wish there was more that we could do within our scope of practice.
It's unclear exactly how many hygienists have chosen to go mobile, but as Jose can attest, taking it on the road comes with its own set of unique challenges.
People always ask me, how are you going to get patients? How are you going to get clients? Where are they coming from? It was a challenge in the beginning, but you impress one person, the whole community comes together to support you. What's up, player? Good, man. Good time. Good. You all right? Welcome.
Jose recently partnered with the Christie Ossington Neighborhood Centre, which provides shelter and transitional housing in Toronto's West End. Andrew Officer is the shelter manager at the centre's Rexdale location, a hotel turned shelter.
When you're underhoused, dental is the last thing you think about. You usually need several appointments, and because we're located in Rexdale, it's challenging for some of our clients to be able to travel downtown Toronto or to Scarborough, where they originally come from, so that and can be an obstacle. We also found out that a lot of people just have this phobia about the dentist and the hygiene. So when you can take away a lot of the barriers, which Jose does, by coming to the facility, having a warm face, knowing it's literally 2 meters away from where you live, it allowed people to be more engaging.
Jose is no stranger to the shelter system. At a young age, he and his family fled Nicaragua during the country's revolution. They eventually made their way to Texas before seeking asylum in Canada.
September 28th, 1990 was when we arrived in Toronto. There was a little bit of snow on the ground, and that was it. Ended up the first home, Red Door Shelter. And I'll always be grateful for the people that were there that helped us. But that's pretty much where this comes from. And seeing my parents work 2, 3, 4 jobs, seeing my father carry our groceries in the middle of winter because he didn't have a car. We didn't have that, right? And so, I'm grateful for everything that they've done, because all of my siblings are now enjoying the fruits of it, right? And that's what we do.
He is true to his word. And that's powerful because Jose actually does it because he cares. Jose is actually taking on some of our clients here without pay. He is truly a man of his word. He wants to help. He wants to give back to the community. So for those who don't know Jose, or for those who've had bad experiences, he'll rewrite the chapter for you.
Hopefully next time around we got enough equipment to do x-rays and all these things.
This is just the beginning of Jose's latest chapter. He has ambitious plans for his mobile dental hygiene clinic, fueled by his passion to meet people where they are and create a meaningful impact on their lives.
I've spoken to people from St. John's, Newfoundland, to all the way in British Columbia. And it's a common goal. We just want to deliver the services with the skill that we're good with, right? But everybody has the same stories, trying to detach ourselves, take that umbilical cord from the dental clinic and set up your own business.
That is the agenda for Thursday, February 20th, 2025. Tomorrow, Steve Paikin and John Michael McGrath will be joined by 2 special guests to discuss the home stretch of this election campaign. I'm Jeyan Jeganathan. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.